All right, so then we're recording. Dan, thank you for finding the time. Thank you for talking to me and the wider Ethereum community about your book today.
Great to be here. Thank you, Kobe.
We will see. I hope that the internet connection stays stable, but we have a lot to cover right here. So your book, which is coming out on September the 9th, 2019, is called Confessions of a Crypto Millionaire. I would love to just
Yes.
dive deep into, well, we have about half an hour. We can see where this conversation leads us. But I'm really curious to know, like, at what point did you actually decide that all the things you had been going through during the last bull run were worth writing a book about?
Well, when I became disillusioned with my corporate career, 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the things I always liked to do was to write, but I never really had the time or the inclination, and for some reason I got a fire lit under me, and I started blogging on Medium, and I kind of went crazy. I got obsessed, as I'm prone to do, and I wrote like 65 stories and in a year and a half or something, and had some success with that, and I really enjoyed it. And so the crypto stuff, it was both this opportunity to change my financial future and to invest in this decentralized world. But then as some of the insanity started, I sort of quickly recognized that it could be a book as well. And you know the thing is, I'm not like a highly technical person at all. So I'm never going to contribute through code, through blockchain stuff. I'm also not like a blockchain philosopher. Like on Twitter, there's all these there's lots of people that are thinking big picture stuff. I get all that. I like it. I enjoy it. But I'm not going to be someone giving a TED talk. But what I is a good first person, or at least I'm comfortable writing in the first person. I've always read memoirs. I've always loved them. And what I didn't see in the crypto space when I got in was people like me who aren't on the cutting edge technically, who are kind of like trying to make a living. I was supporting a family at the time, I never heard the stories of a person like me and what they thought of crypto, what they thought of the promises, and also how they dealt with the risks involved in investing, the potential payoffs involved in investing. And I remember even talking to Fred Ursum, I think you pronounce his last name, at Coinbase at some meetup, and saying, like, you've got to tell the stories of normal people investing in this stuff. So I thought that in addition to being an opportunity, like a really amazing story that I could write a book and establish myself as a writer, it also was like my contribution to the community. For what this is my like area of expertise, and it's a fairly weird one in crypto. A first-person writer writing for a mainstream audience. So it all kind of came together, and in that way, the crypto is kind of like two blessings. One, in the opportunity to invest, and the other to have like this pretty cool story to tell.
Yeah, the subtitle of the book is My Unlikely Escape from Corporate America. But for anyone listening to this and anyone interested in the book, which I highly recommend, I found it to be such a fascinating read into the early history or the early days of Ethereum and then the boom and bust of 2017-18. But it does feature quite a bit about you leaving corporate America. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was so yeah, I was fairly successful in corporate America. I sort of gritted my way to a mid-executive level position at a large Fortune 10 company, which goes unnamed in the book for legal reasons, and it's kind of an amalgamation. But I was never, and again, this is not like this is not like some amazing insight. I was never happy in corporate America. I was. I never felt like my personality was right to rise up through the ranks. And after you get to a certain point, it's not just about the work you do; it's about having this like executive presence. And I talk about this thing called flip side, which I just sort of deem my the personality that wants an escape, the side of my personality that feels like I'm not worthy. It has a chip on its shoulder. It's like thinks I'm an imposter, and that flip side throughout my corporate career would always like rise up and slap me down. I'd take a joke too far. I'd get all insecure in a meeting when I'm supposed to be like whiteboarding some big problem. And as you rise up, it was more and more important that professional leadership conference, this like cult of the leader, that you like exhibited this leadership qualities, and I just like didn't have them. I felt good in the actual work that I did, but I never felt like I was. I didn't see myself in like the C-suite or whatever. At the same time, I kind of had all this ambition to do something big with my life. I think like probably everyone has some degree of that. Mine was partially driven by the chip on my shoulder, some depression I had as a kid. I dealt with addiction, which we'll probably get into at some point. But corporate America wasn't going to do it for me. And it was, the latter part of my career was scary because it wasn't just me that realized that secretly. It was the people I worked with and the powers that be. And for someone who could grit his way through to a higher level, to a mid-executive level, it was becoming clear that I wasn't going to be able to rise any further. And in fact, I might have actually that I was on my path to washing out entirely.
Mm-hmm. From the Forbes.com review of the book, which I really enjoyed, they wrote, for Conway, crypto was only partly about the money. I think there's something wrong with the audio on your side.
Yeah, I'm clicking it back on. Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. So from the Forbes.com review, it said, for Conway, crypto was only partly about the money. It was also about finding liberation and salvation. It turns out, he says, that my entire identity had prepared me for crypto. And actually, in the book, you touch upon this. You touch upon your money or your life, the seeds of financial independence. So this wasn't just a story, or this book isn't just a story about the last 2 years, somebody getting lucky. This is a broader, wider story about you finally finding something where all those interests kind of came together. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, what I felt in my core about corporate America, and look at the studies, so many people are miserable. Some people love it, but so many people are miserable. And this is a first world problem. Let's just say that, people that are miserable in corporate America have it good still in relation to other people on the planet, refugees and all that. But hey, this is the problem I'm associated with. So that's what the book deals with. But it is a problem statistically, and and again, this focus on trying to be a leader and how leadership is codified in a corporation through compliance applications, chains of command, bureaucracy, all this. It never felt right to me. And this is from the very beginning of my career. As you mentioned, I had experimented with strategies for financial independence. I had quit my job, reduced my expenses. There's a whole lot of literature. Your Money or Your Life is a great FIRE book from 20, 30 years ago that that is Financial Independence, Retire Early. That's FIRE community. I'd gotten into that, but I was, unmarried at the time, in my 20s. I tried to do that for a year or so. I moved back home with my parents, and I actually sold my car. But it was so isolating that this was before the dot-com boom, that when someone I used to work with offered me a job, I couldn't resist going back because it was feeling too weird, this path. So, what you look like 15, 20 years later, crypto pops up, and suddenly there's potentially another path to achieve this, admittedly fraught, risky, and sorts of traps along the way, but I couldn't help but be resisted to be interested and to be attracted to that idea, and to dive in and think about that financial side. And that was the first thing that got me. It wasn't the decentralization. It was simply a kernel of, at the time, it was just all I knew about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was like $300, and there was simply the thought, what if it goes up again? That was like the trap door to the rabbit hole. And soon after that, though, this whole other up, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like what I was hearing about decentralization, pieces of it. I started to think, well, this could be an alternative for folks, not today and not tomorrow, but someday, to contribute work and projects outside of this corporate hierarchy, and to contribute in a decentralized fashion in the years ahead. So that was like another fire that lit under me, in addition to like the greedy speculator who was thinking like, hey, maybe this is my path to finally get out of this miserable corporate life. At the same time, this other side was like, wow, this could like help everyone one day. And again, we're not there yet, but that was kind of the two kernels of what was drawing me deeper and deeper.
And in this book, you mention, or you write about your family, and you write about your grandfather moving in, or moving from Ireland to America. You write about your sister who had made and lost some money in penny stocks during the dot-com bubble. You write about your brother actually jumping off a bridge in a bed or in a dare. So you come from, I would say, a risk-loving family, and I'm wondering, like, when you did that initial purchase, when you used that $100,000, like what actually went through your mind?
It was, so yes, there's always my family. There's always been a bit of a wild hair, and that there's always been a bit of like, maybe being the loudest person at the party, or taking a big risk, being a little unconventional. And it's something that we're very proud of, but it comes with upsides and downsides. And it started, like you said, it started with my grandfather, who left Ireland and came here in the early 20th century. And I kind of trace a little bit of that and draw comparisons to my story. But to be honest, by the time, because I had such a fraught history with my wife, my wife and I are raising 3 kids. We have a mortgage, very conventional life. We never experienced the Silicon Valley bubble, but we, firsthand. But we did. We were kind of on the edge of it. But I had gone through an addiction period, and it had strained my marriage and strained my family. And I was the bad side of that reckless behavior is that you can do really self-destructive and destructive things for your family. And I was absolutely guilty of that. And I go through that in the book. But by the time that I was ready to invest that first $100,000, I was so convinced that it was going to go up and that Ethereum was going to be big, that I would have almost done anything. And my wife cut me a deal, which I explained in the book, where we had to, she's almost as crazy as I am, or maybe as crazy. We had to go on these family vacations. She wanted to take these family vacations, and if we did, I could invest the money. And I instantly said yes, even though it doubled the economic peril we were in, as we'd find out. But I was just so absolutely convinced, because when I say I get obsessed, I was spending like 10 hours a day in addition to a full-time job and doing my best to raise a family. I was thankfully sober for years by that point. That I was, it was more the main emotion I had was FOMO, fear of missing out. And I had seen so much, I just thought at any moment this could take off. And it was just everything I had internalized from Reddit and Twitter and the boards. Now, whether I was right or wrong, or got lucky with the timing or what, I'm not saying like I was so brilliant that I saw it. Obviously I did see it at the time, but I'm just describing what I was feeling, 100% certainty at the time.
Yeah, and I really love, and we chatted about this briefly before we started recording, but Eileen, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Really, Eileen, yeah, she really is one of the heroes of the story, I would say, because when in the book she proposes, she comes back to you after about a week, and she gives you this deal like, hey, you can invest in this magic internet money, but we're in the next 18 months we're going to do this and this and this. You actually write like, this chick is crazier than I thought, or is crazier than I am.
Yes, it was totally crazy. And it perfectly encapsulated each of our types of recklessness, because I was so focused on financial independence, getting enough money so I could like get out of the corporate world, which was making me miserable. And she was very focused on the family experiences and the family life. And we're kind of playing to type there a little bit. But she's no softie. She's no pushover, as you find out from reading the book. But it was a crazy deal. But she was amazing, because she stayed grounded through this whole thing. I mean, when Ether crashed after the Dow, I certainly wasn't going to bring it up to her. And as I write in the book, like, there was a chance that it would like never come up again. And I had to go back after the book and say, like, we didn't talk about this, right? Like, I'm not like making this up, right? She's like, no, we didn't. She doesn't, her family, they don't talk a lot about money. She has an amazing ability to compartmentalize. And, but she like, it literally might not have come up again. And when I asked her, because, then I do even more, I go in even deeper later, and I asked her, why did you let me do it? How could you have let me do this, even though ultimately it worked out? And, what she said is pretty amazing for her character too. She said, I was inspired. I had my mojo back. I was feeling good. I was confident, and it like seeped out of me. And it made everything around the household more enjoyable, with the family, with her, or with our friends. And she didn't want to pop the bubble. And she didn't want to, she didn't think that it was a scam, but she also didn't think that it would ever pop like I did. And she didn't let herself go any further on that in terms of thinking of the financial consequences. Of course, I had a ready answer for all that about how we'd be okay. Maybe we'd have to work for 5 or 10 more years, that kind of a thing. We had some equity in our house that would, help us. But yeah, it was pretty amazing how she handled the whole thing. And if it wasn't for her calm, her grounded, her playing straight man, to me, I absolutely would not have been able. We wouldn't be where we're at now.
Yeah, you have this great. I took some screenshots and I wrote down some quotes, and there's this story you write down how you sold this 7,000 something ether, covering for about 2.7 million, and then you have this great part where you write, Aileen didn't seem to register the 2 million the same way I did. She was happy, of course, but ready to move on after a brief conversation. I could spend all day talking about the money we now had, the big money we might still get. Her instinct was that these conversations were unholy, so she avoided them.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
it sounds there's this other quote I really wanted to bring up because it will bring us to the heart of the Ethereum community and the Reddit community. It goes like this: Aileen quickly decided that she didn't give shit about this magic money if it meant that the rest of our family vacation focused around me relating snippets of something Vitalik said, or a prediction of future riches based on the analysis of a fellow ETH trader.
Totally. I mean, and this is something like people that live this period, they widely relate to, is that it was so crazy, and we were so deep in, and it was changing our lives, that there wasn't a whole lot of room to think about anything else. And I would struggle to come up with conversation that didn't involve ether, blockchain, crypto, Vitalik. I mean, it was, and even though I thought I was being restrained, like when I asked my kids even, or Eileen, they're like, "Oh, that's all you talked about. That's all you want to talk about." And I remember now what that was like. It was just this like incredible cocktail, And I'm speaking as an addict. It was as powerful. Going through that period was as powerful as taking any opiate, taking any drug, anything. I couldn't sleep for periods. Even though I didn't want to, on the soccer sidelines, I would just tell people about crypto and ether, and I'd find some way to get it in. And I didn't even realize I was doing it, but it was just impossible to stop, talking about it, thinking about it. But she, like I said, yeah, she never went there. She never went there. She what you're supposed to do, which is like look at it clinically. I mean, she went beyond that. She just sort of like tuned it out entirely, even after we made all the money, which, that when we made that first 2.7, which is 2 million after tax, she didn't, it was like a 15-minute conversation with her, if that, and then we like moved on.
There's this. I'm curious, like how does this? Because I came in a little bit later, and I can relate to everything you're saying right now. And well, not for that amount of money, but I can definitely relate to the kind of subreddit culture and the Twitter culture. Because in this book, you also write about the donut day that Jeremiah introduced, and the about 350 comment, and the filthy animal comment, and all those kind of things. So how? I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about those early days, especially on crypto Reddit and crypto Twitter as well. But I'm just really curious what it is you searched in the subreddits, and then what you actually found there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way you get close to people is you celebrate, in real life is you celebrate your victories with them. You have people over for birthday or milestones, birthdays, first communions, whatever, celebrations, new jobs, things like that. And then you also mourn together, funerals, lost jobs, sick children, all this kind of stuff. And it didn't matter if it was like if it was virtual, crypto, Reddit, the extremes that we were experiencing together. Because I was I had a different username. It was called DAP fan back then, but I was in 2015, and then when I made the first initial investment and through the DAO hack in June of 16, and all through that 6 months where it kept tanking, tanking, tanking. And then, of course, in January and really February of 2017, and when it went up. And, like I said, 10 hours of content, probably 5 hours was on ETH Trader. And you came I came to love the people there. I mean, I swear, where else have I been in a community where you've experienced the lowest of lows and the highest of highs? It wasn't like we were playing a video game together and, hey, we won. This was like life-changing money. And not to mention just the whole vibe. I was comparing it to the corporate culture I was in, where we had like research tested hashtags for our philanthropy campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And crypto was just like completely off the reservation. And these like crazy memes and jokes, and we were all in on them. And I sound corny even talking about it, but there was an affinity, like a brotherhood and a sisterhood. There weren't many women. There were some though, but we had lived through this together. And crypto's so tribal anyway. And so if it wasn't for ETH Trader, if it wasn't for the Reddits, many of us wouldn't have been able to hold through this, because you had like-minded people. And again, we weren't just rooting for a sports team. We were rooting for our financial lives, because while many people took the sound approach and put in no more than they can afford to lose, there were many others like me that put in more than they can afford to lose. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but it's just a fact.
Yeah.
So when we and I'll take it even one step further to risk sounding even more corny. We cared about each other, even there were trolls and there was sarcasm. So a lot of times people would post things about like, hey guys, like it would go up, it would start to go up after a 6 months drop, then it would drop. And it was like devastation. Like we thought we were going to be back, and then it was like utter emotional devastation. And people would say, guys, I'm out. Like I can't handle this. I'm depressed. I can't, I can't talk about anything else. I can't think about anything else. I'm drinking too much. And like I said, it was like the most it was the most powerful drug I had ever taken when this thing started to pop. And or it was the worst withdrawal I'd ever had, when we thought it was going to pop and it would crash back down, and the trolls would come in and say, you guys are idiots, ETH is never going to have a benefit, whatever. And we would jump in there and like help these people, and this is like, these are the things I remember. There was a lot of FUD and trolls and memes and stupid shit about Lambos and all that kind of stuff, which was also kind of funny. But you can't manufacture what we had all been through together when the community was smaller. And it'll happen again, and it'll be a different type of that thing, because the people that went through this with Bitcoin in 13, 14, 15, you see how that Bitcoin community is. Well, in 16 or 17, the same thing happened with the Ethereum community.
Yeah, it's really from my perspective, because I think our paths crossed, because in the book you describe meeting Vitalik or seeing Vitalik speak at an event at Plug and Play in San Francisco at the Accelerator, and
yeah.
I think I was there actually in February 2016, not to see Vitalik, of course. It was just an unrelated visit. And I think that was around the period, some weeks or months from whenever you saw Vitalik there. So it's kind of funny that our paths crossed. But what I wanted to say is that what you're describing right now is, back then, I guess the subreddit community was still so small that you really, really recognize each other. But then I'd say all during 2018, and especially end of 2018, we had the MakerDAO system was live, and the CDPs were live, and people had been. I think they actually launched during the peak of the bubble. And then you could actually real time see people's CDPs get liquidated, and there were CDPs with thousands and thousands and even tens of thousands of ETH, not just DAI, but ETH getting liquidated. And then there was this low point in December when ETH hit like $80, $85, whatever, and just going through that was so, at least for me, it's a thing that in this community, your emotional and financial incentives are aligned like nowhere else, and that just, if you go through the boom and the bust, it just creates for such a wonderful community, I would say. Which also is like my follow-up question. You said, or you mentioned that you would like this book to reach a mainstream audience. How involved are you still in the community? Like how do you think you'll go forward? Because you've written this book where you lived through a very, very specific area or period, but now things change, the community grows by factor 10, 100, we'll see over the next coming months and years. But how do you square all those things?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, I'm kind of like Rip Van Winkle. I really, I threw myself into writing this book. All right. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh, yeah. The headset went out for a quick sec. I threw myself into writing this book about 2 years ago. Okay. And all the time I was spending on ETH Trader and the crypto Twitter and, listening to podcasts and all that kind of stuff. I really, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Yeah. I really focused. I was focused on writing the book, right? So I was tracking the community, but I had also sold a large chunk, even though I still have a good chunk. And sorry, just a quick problem with the headphones there, but are you hearing me through the headphones?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. It's perfectly fine from my side.
That's fine. Okay, perfect. So now I was tracking it, but not to the degree that I was obviously tracking the price. But I was the development, yes, to some degree. But since that's not my foray, it always took more of my energy to try to track what was happening on the development front. So anyway, I pop up with this book, right, 2 years later, and again, I haven't gone anywhere, but I'm spending way less time in the community. And you're absolutely right. It's changed, and I feel like. There's a show, this miniseries, Band of Brothers, and there's this guy who went through D-Day with Easy Company, right? And he went through D-Day and he survived, and then he got like a shot in the butt, so he goes to the hospital, and he's got to recover for a period of months when these guys are slogging their way through, going east into Europe, and I feel like then when he shows back up, he thinks they're all still brothers. But he hasn't been in the trenches for 3 months, and these guys have. And I feel like a little bit of me, when I popped back up, felt that way a little bit. I put a post on ETH Trader, and the tone was off, and I realized afterwards that I didn't quite internalize how bad this bear market has been because I've been so focused on my project. And you bring it up. I mean, absolutely brutal, totally brutal. So that was one thing, and I get it that a story about a dude that made a bunch of millions of dollars is, probably fascinating to a lot of people, but also painful, and maybe some people might even be a little resentful. But the other thing was when resentful.
No, when I read you cashed out at $915, the first thing I felt was I was happy for you, good job. But then I looked at my own portfolio. I was like, yeah, well, good for him.
I know. And I just kind of forgot about that. And even a lot of the OGs, the old time traders didn't get out. The reason why I was able to get out was because I had put so much in that it would have been especially reckless if I hadn't sold a majority of my chunk, because but indisputably.
Yeah, by that time, and I'm reluctant to share numbers because I think people should just read it to get a sense of how big your position was, and so I won't give that away. But what you were saying, or what I understood from it is that selling at 900 was just a once in a lifetime event, kind of. So it made sense to sell at that point and not just wait for 2 or 3 or 4,000 per ETH Well, that didn't come obviously, but there was talk in the subreddit, and there was this tangible feeling, because I very vividly remember this as well. Actually, at the end of December or beginning of January 2018, I made a bet with a friend, and we betted when Ether would hit $2,000, $3,000, and $4,000. And looking back on that, we were just so ridiculously overestimating ourselves and the market. Well, and it hurt when it came crashing down. But I vividly remember the talk on the subreddit, and you had this euphoria, and anything seemed possible.
Yeah, it was all talk of the flippening, and it was all talk of if even if Ether at that time at 2000, it still wasn't worth as much as Facebook and nowhere near Google. And it was like, well, if this is really a whole new World Wide Web, but this is really, tens of thousands of dApps that need Ether to run, and a whole, rebuilding of lots of things, not everything, but lots of things on a decentralized blockchain. This could just be like the investment of a lifetime. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't going to happen, but it was much too quick, too soon. And that was now 2 years ago.
Yeah, there's this. So just coming back to this point, because I would really love for people to read this book, in part because it's a great history on the early days of Ethereum, not from a technological point of view, because there's so many articles in the Wall Street Journal, even in TechCrunch, that focus on the early days from a technical level. But what I really got out of your book was your perspective, the perspective of the retail investor, and going through all of this. And something, I mean, we never know, of course, but I think that anyone who reads this book will be better prepared if another euphoria stage like this happens. We'll see when and if and all of those things. But I really enjoyed reading it, because those emotions that you described, they just feel so real. And you describe how from the beginning from the beginning of a trip to the end of the trip, you would have lost or gained really, really big amounts of money, which many people on the subreddit right now and on crypto Twitter, it just feels very, very familiar in a way.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and it's the crazy thing about crypto. It's like, because it's all animated by money and by investment, it just puts everything on this, like, on steroids, like steroids to the extreme. And it's the funnest game in town with the highest stakes. And fun is not like the best word to describe it, but there's nothing like it. And it like people still when you talk, a lot of people are going to be like, okay, so wait, it's digital money, so I can buy a cup of coffee with it. And it's like, that is like so not interesting. Like, yeah, maybe someday, who cares? I mean, listen, that's important. You can use it as a currency or whatever. Store value is more important, but it's rebuilding things in a decentralized fashion, and not everything will be rebuilt. But people, that's the thing. People don't get it when they talk about digital currency. They still think of the bubble and just the investment, or the digital gold someday. But the whole idea of like decentralized applications and decentralized finance, to a lot of people you would think would understand it, they still just don't get it. And I was hoping that my book, because I'm not like a genius, I'm not a mathlete, I'm never going to contribute to the code, but I can get it at some emotional level, or like the vibe of it, the mojo of the whole thing. I can get that. And some people would say it's foolish to get it at that level, but it's what I got, and what I still believe is that if I could write this book to explain it in that way, maybe people would get that part of it as well. And maybe I pull them in with Crypto Millionaire and all this kind of stuff, but one thing they come out of it with is like some understanding of the great promise. Because the money made, like, that's an amazing thing. Like the amount that we can make or lose, like, that's totally fascinating, compelling. But like, what people don't get is like the big idea. The rabbit hole is not just about the money. It's about your mind getting blown when you start to think about the implications of where this could go in the future. And I've done my level best to to portray that part of the story as well. And we'll see if how a mainstream audience reacts to it.
The what you said about being a communicator, about communicating this story and talking about it, I really got that sense, because in somewhere you described the Bitcoin gains in early 2015, I think, or 16. You described it as retirement porn, and for me, somebody who has been following the financial independence literature for years now, I had never even thought about the term retirement porn, because but it's really the perfect description, because you have this plan, this 10, 20, 30, 40 year plan, and then you see this investment opportunity and your mind goes like, wait a moment, I can do in a few months or years what I would normally do in maybe 4 decades. So I'll definitely be using the retirement porn reference.
Yeah, it was fantasy land. You know, you pull up one of the fire Reddits and just read about people, what they're doing, how much money they made, people like on a path, and it was like inspiring. But even if you weren't using it, it was just like fun to like float away in the thoughts of being financially independent. And I couldn't get enough.
So how's life right now after becoming a crypto millionaire?
It's good. It's good. So the thing, like I said, the thing I grapple with in the book is part of what drove me was this chip on my shoulder. You know, all my demons that I fought. Everyone's got some. I definitely had mine, and it drove me through my career and then through the crypto stuff, and even trying to finish this book and get it out. And so now with the book about to be released, I'm at a new chapter, and I know instinctively what I need to do, which is to try to become like more Zen. To try to, it sounds dumb, but I've been trying to prove myself for so long, and now I've written a book, and I'm, even though there's all these like grand messages that I'm trying to get out with the book, there's like that part of me that still wants to like show everyone, look what I did, and and I recognize that's the part of me that kind of like drives me to achieve things, but it's also run amok and like ruined my life during long stretches. And so, frankly, I kind of have a reckoning coming. And listen, I choose to have this reckoning at any other point in my life because of how things turned out for me. But I really do need to try to take a step back and try to. I want to be not so focused on myself. I want to help others, not just like giving to nonprofits. We're doing that, continue to do that, and I have some bigger ideas there that I want to flesh out now that I have this done. But just like being more gracious to people, being more in the moment. Again, sounds like cliche, but it's really what I need. It's what I need because this last. It really started with the blogging, 2 years intense blogging, just trying to get likes and recommends. 2 years of like super intense crypto, an insane level of focus, and then 2 years of like less insane focus on crypto, but intense sane focus on writing this book. So I have to, the book doesn't have like a fairy tale ending. Oh my God, we made all this money, everything's perfect. It's like now it's just like a new chapter that I would choose to have at any other point in my life. I wanted this moment. Now I got to like see what I do with it and whether, I don't blow it somehow, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I found that to be so exciting, and I would just like to I would find it really exciting to hear in 2, 3, 4, 5 years how you've managed to deal with this. Because quite frankly, as I was reading the book, I more than once thought like you are really reckless in a way. Like you've taken risks that, especially in your situation, I'm not just talking from a pure objective point of view, but you're a father, you have a family, you have a household, you have a mortgage. And then you take these risks, and the reader or the listener can buy the book and just discover it for themselves. But more than once, I really thought, wow, this guy this guy is reckless. And I'm reading about it because I know that in the end it worked out. But I can imagine that now that you've gotten the thing that you wanted, that you set out to get, the journey isn't over. You just have other stuff to focus on, how to make this work, because I can imagine that these underlying desires and forces are still there, and you kind of have to put everything together and see how it goes from here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I've been so lucky in my life. I was unlucky. I was unlucky in some genetics. in terms of the depression, the addiction, maybe some genetics, but also choices I made with the drugs and the alcohol. But I've been incredibly lucky. Like I didn't lose my family. I never got arrested. I mean, I did get arrested at one point, but at the end, more teasers to read the book. But during my most addictive, dangerous period, when I had three kids I was raising and a corporate job and a very shaky marriage, I never got in trouble with the law. There were times when I got close. I got out, and I go to 12-step meetings, which is something I really need to continue doing. And mine is the rare story of someone who didn't lose everything or something big and substantial. I did damage for sure that we have worked on and that I think I limited, but there was damage for sure. But I got out, and then with the crypto, I ended up well. And again, we just talked about that. So I honestly, I would be a fool to tempt fate again, because things like this, like I say in the book, things aren't supposed to work out like this a lot of times. And I feel like I actually bring up the Kennedys, not like I'm a Kennedy or anything like that, but I feel like, when things work out like they've worked out for me, there's something, I don't know, there's something in the air, like a great tragedy could strike as well. I'm being dramatic here, but, I feel like the stakes are high. It's, even though I'm in a good position financially, the stakes are high for what comes next for me and my family. And I better really not let my flip side, my demons take over again, because I doubt it's going to.
Yeah, and that's the primary reason why I would actually really recommend your book to people that are relatively new in the crypto space, and this even to a big degree includes myself, because I wasn't there at the very, very early days. But what I got out of your book is that if you're taking a major position like you did, or you're heavily, not just financially but emotionally invested, it's very easy to read all the FUD and to doubt yourself and not to know what to do. But then you also have to wonder, like, what actually happens if all of this comes true, like if all of this actually goes well. And then you write about things like I don't know, I can't remember how you exactly described it, but there was some SIM card swapping, or these moments, these very intense moments where the investment strategy is one thing, but then you have this scare here or this scare there, and other things go wrong, and you worry about stuff like, hey, okay, I might make millions, but how do I actually get that money into my bank? Like, what if they freeze my account, and all those kind of things. So it's just a great read to show that what I really got out of it is that it's easy to worry about stuff, but you also need to read one of these stories, because it makes you. It shows me that it's not just a straight linear line, like let's do this, let's invest this amount of money, or this amount of emotions, and it will be a straight line till the end goal. It's like, no, it's nothing like that. And that's why I just thought it was so helpful to read this book and just like be on the front seat, on the front row of this story, which I think could happen to anyone, again, who's invested, who's listening to this today in 2019, going forward over the next couple of years.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, Kobe. And yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that I've said the book is a response to people that say that I got lucky. And it's not a rebuttal, though. I'm not trying to say I didn't get lucky, but what I'm trying to say is, like, this crazy thing happened, and I did some things to help make it happen. I did some things that were absolutely reckless, and I could have completely wrecked myself and my financial future. But what I really wanted to do was just describe it and all its complexity and insanity. And so so that some people might come away saying he got lucky. Other people might say, wow, he really had the courage to hold. But more importantly, it wasn't any one of those things. It was just this insane thing that happened with, like you said, all these inputs, the scares, the hacks. And I wanted it to stand as not as me as a master in the universe, obviously, or giving a big TED talk. But what I do want is I wanted to be considered as good of a chronicler of what was happening. That would be the kind of compliment I would want out of all this. It is not like, oh my God, that guy made millions. Look he had huge balls to do all that and all that. I don't want that. What I want wow, that guy really captured what it was all about. And I think that's a little bit what the title of the book, Confessions of a Crypto Millionaire, I think people's first blush could be, oh, this guy wants to say how great he is because he like made all this money. They're right. I did want people to say how great he is, but I wanted to be, I actually captured what that was like, and it would be allow me to show that I know how to write something good and that I could tell the story, the Ethereum community, accurately from my perspective, which is completely different than, like a book by Vitalik would be unbelievable, obviously massively different than mine as just a dude that kind of came across this and then went deeper than he ever thought he would.
I think the biggest compliment I can give you, because it's certainly one of the things the feeling I got from reading your book is there's always this very subtle distinction between the biography and the autobiography. And when you read the biography or you watch the TED Talk, it's like, oh yeah, that guy got lucky, or he got this or that, or that guy won a Grand Slam tournament. But then you read the autobiography or they talk about their lives and they're like, yes, I'm this great tennis player or what have you, but it meant that from the age of 4, I was on a tennis court every day for 5 hours. And then this first date, I didn't get to go there because I was training. And then you kind of start listening to these people talk and you're like, yes, maybe you got really lucky, but you certainly paid a price for it. And that's the kind of the distinction between the nice story and then the autobiography. And reading your book, I really thought it was more of an autobiography. You just describe you describe things the way you are. And as I said earlier, at some points I really thought this guy is reckless, but it sounds relatable. It reads like a relatable story. And I think that is what ultimately makes me really curious about your story and really happy of having read it, and I think many people will feel the same way.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I mean, I put so much of my, it's been a hard process writing the book, multiple drafts, I had, professional editing team. So, I really had a lot writing on this. I spent 2 years of my life focused like exclusively on this. And so it means a lot to me. And thank you so much. That's a really nice thing to say.
I will not ask you for a prediction because I try to avoid
Okay.
those, but I will ask you, you've been through the $13, the Dow hike to $1,400, the very big roller coaster. Where do you think we are today? If you look back on your story, today Ether is around $180. This bear market is kind of coming to an end. Who knows? But from the sense that you're getting from the community, from your involvement, still, where do you think, looking back on your own path, where do you think we are right now?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, so coming back after 2 years and really focusing in like I have been in the last month or two, the other thing that I've noticed is just it is unbelievable how much the community has grown in the last year or two. The DeFi stuff, the amount of development, the fact that Ethereum has really locked up the almost an unsurmountable lead in the smart contract space. Um, I am so bullish on Ethereum and on Ether as a currency. I'm not going to hedge myself here. I'm just going to say I think it's going way up in the next 2 years. And I know some people say, "Oh, you're crazy. You shouldn't say that." I don't care. I believe it. Listen, all these institutions, all these big institutions that we're actually trying to disrupt, they believe that crypto's here to stay. All of them have some major play in Ethereum or an exclusive play in Ethereum. The developer lead is unbelievable, but as an asset, everyone these folks are saying you need to put a little bit into crypto, a certain amount into crypto, uh, because it's a volatile asset. But if crypto sticks around and it's a volatile, high growth asset, I mean, what are the chances that it stays like that? Ether stays at this price for a certain amount of time? In my mind, it's zero. I think it's going way up in the future because I believe that the engineers are going to continue developing. There's been delays, there's been FUD, there's been difficulties. We knew some of this stuff was like nearly impossible to get done. I don't see any slowdown in the progress. I mean, I don't see any major stops in the process. It's been slowed down to pieces, but it's hard for me to imagine that some of these projects aren't going to hit pay dirt, that we don't find a way for Ethereum to scale. And when that happens, I'm sorry, I think the coin's going way up. And I think that this will be the time when when just like in 2016 for the people like me that cashed out and made money when it was going down, then this will be the period where you guys, including me, because I have a pretty big stake still, where we earn it and we hold and we have faith that the developers are going to continue to develop these things and that there's going to be real world solutions and all that. And listen, I'm allowed to say this because I just wrote, I'm a Joe civilian who wrote a book. I don't have a project to push. I'm not a financial advisor. I should probably say that because there's some lawyer somewhere, but that's what I believe. And I'm unashamed to say it.
Dan, tell me, where can people find out about your book? Where can they buy it? Where can they reach out to you? Give me the whole deal.
Okay, so I'm the most important thing would be if someone wanted to buy the book. It's available on Monday, September 9th, and it's on Amazon. You can just look at it. There's a ebook which is on sale for the first week for $2.99. Then there's a paperback book which is available, and also an audiobook. And so that would be the best place to find me. If people bought it and wanted to review it, loved it or hated it, reviews are important. And then the other place, my website is danconwaywriter.com.
Conway.
danconwaywriter.com.
Yeah, Conway, Conway.
You got it.
All right. So anyone, just go on Amazon, search for Confessions of a Crypto Millionaire by Dan Conway. Dan, thank you very much. I really wish you the best. I cannot stress enough that I really, really appreciate and respect the fact, I mean, we're having this conversation. I hope the book does well for you, but I really appreciate the fact that you actually sat down, you took the time, and you actually wrote the book, because I think it's a great reference. I really enjoyed it. And I just really respect the fact that you just did that. I hope that through this interview, through other through other channels, you'll just have a splendid book launch and the book will do well. But I really wanted to say, thank you for doing this in the first place.
Hey, you're a really gracious host. Thank you so much, Kobe. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you. And I also shout out to JT Nickel, who helped to set this up, and to the filthy animals at ETH Finance.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you very much, Dan. Good luck.
Okay. Thank you.